Caucus. Carter.
Mr Speaker, as the previous speaker has said, the purpose of this bill is to enhance New Zealand's anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism network worldwide and assure the world of New Zealand's financial system is robust, transparent and honest. I know that the question of PEPs, as the previous member was referring to them, politically exposed persons, has been a subject, Mr Speaker, of some debate in this House. I was just listening with, I guess, a degree of bemusement at my colleague Trevor Mallard's exploration of that particular phenomenon, in reference particularly to Mr English's embarrassing situation over his rent at his house. But that's, I guess, an issue. That, I guess, is an issue which focuses us in this legislation on how a financial system picks up where corruption has been occurring in a financial system. And in the course of the Select Committee looking at this legislation, Mr Speaker, we had a confidential report from the New Zealand Police about whether or not money laundering had been going on through our financial system, whether or not there had been a transference of funds between different South Pacific locations, and whether or not there were genuine reasons why we should be concerned that politically exposed persons, I'm not necessarily saying New Zealand ones, but ones in our region, were using our financial system to launder money. The report that we received back was indeed that there were cases of that were proven. There were also concerns that international terrorist groups, and sadly this is a phenomenon of our age, using the global financial networks to move funds around to finance their terrorist activities. There was concern that our financial system could provide that cover to wash money through, to make it look legitimate and to use it to finance terrorist activities. Now, New Zealand is a member of the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, which my colleague Keith Locke was talking about a few minutes ago. That, of course, is an international organisation established to combat this very issue, money laundering and terrorist financing. Now, this is an issue that the previous Labor government was working on. My colleague, the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove, as Associate Minister of Justice in the previous government, had officials working on this issue because it is something that New Zealand has an obligation internationally to be working on to make sure and assure our partners, global partners, and the international financial system, that our systems are robust and effective in stopping money laundering, particularly with its focus these days on international terrorism. One of the things that the Select Committee was really concerned about, Mr Speaker, was that the structures that we put in place within our financial systems were in sync with those in Australia. As most people are aware, much of our banking system is Australian-based. So it is the banking system particularly, although the wider financial system, of course, but particularly the banking system, that is the framework where this new legislation must be effective. And so we wanted to make sure that that whatever legislation this Parliament passed would be in sync with Australian legislation and would be acceptable to the banking sector, because we're relying on them to make sure it works. And so in that process, the Select Committee engaged extensively with the New Zealand banking sector. We, in fact, had the help of 4 representatives from that sector, one of them a previous advisor to the Honourable Michael Cullen in his office as one of his major financial advisors, a very experienced young woman. They were extraordinarily helpful in helping us work through this system, through this legislation, to make sure that the system, A, was in sync with Australia, B, was acceptable and practical for the banking system, without creating enormous compliance costs, which was something that we were very keen to avoid. So I have to say, Mr Speaker, it's unusual in this Parliament to be working on a piece of legislation in which everybody agrees it's important, where there's very much an attitude of bipartisan approach to it. And Mr Hayes, the chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, was extraordinarily helpful in taking on board advice from opposition MPs. And I have to say that the Honourable Pete Hodson, who took the lead from Labour's team on this legislation, was amazing. He has an incredible ability to get straight down to the nitty-gritty. And he has also an amazing ability to digest a vast amount of technical data. I guess it's his scientific training. And he, I have to say, took very much the lead role on the Select Committee in working through how we can make this legislation A, effective, B, compliant with our international obligations, and C, acceptable to the banking sector. So I want to take this opportunity to thank Mr Hayes for the work that he did in chairing the process, and particularly to thank and praise my Labour Party colleague Pete Hodson for making this bill a better piece of legislation as it comes before this House. So, Mr Speaker, I have great pleasure in saying that the Labour opposition fully supports this legislation.